Good first outing. You nailed it. This is the one.
Welcome back to the Trackstar Podcast, a conversation about music and culture centered around a playlist I've specifically created for our guests. This week, we're talking about King of Rock and Roll, Elvis Presley.
I mean, he is the music, and he is conducting it. And this makes him completely unique.
That's when I start to understand Elvis in a different way.
He actually physically gives himself to the audience.
Not just on stage, but in life.
No one expected it, and no one expected the physicality.
Our guest this week is someone with a deep understanding and appreciation for who Elvis is, both as a musician and as a person, based on 2 different films he made about the king, Baz Luhrmann.
I have worked with so many great artists. Nobody is ready for what they're about to see.
It's money well spent.
I think so.
In this episode, we'll talk through some of my favorite songs from this truly spectacular new concert film to gain a greater appreciation of one of the greatest artists of all time. Without further ado, roll the intro.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Check, check.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Trackstar, let's go. I wish the world could be in these headphones right now. I'm on the show. How fun.
We're off to a very hot start here. Welcome to the show.
I feel welcome. Thank you, Jack.
Before we start with the music, just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Baz Luhrmann. I'm here with Jack, and I've just completed a film called Epic, Elvis Presley in Concert, where Elvis sings and tells his story like never before.
It's unbelievable.
Really?
It's really special.
Thank you. Well, where did you see it, Jack?
It's spectacular. I can't tell you where I saw it. You're gonna
Please
kill
see it
me.
in
You're gonna
IMAX.
kill me. Not yet.
You
But
won't
I
be able
watched
to.
it. I watched it on the computer, and I
Jack?
know. I told you you're gonna kill me.
In all honesty, Jack, you strike me as a nice person.
And with him-
and a person of great knowledge and incredible taste. My God, look at these glasses. They're beautiful. But I got to go. I mean, you watched it on a computer. I mean, honestly, when you take people out on a date, is that the first line you say to them? Like, I mean, I don't know. It's
I
not.
watched it for the first time
I
on the
feel hurt.
computer, but for the second time,
You're backtracking.
I'm watching it on IMAX.
Come on, try harder.
I was blown away within the first 2 minutes of the movie, and immediately I was kicking myself or wishing that I could watch it on IMAX, because you can tell even on a smaller screen that it's spectacular.
The forgiveness I can find in my soul for you, right, is that if it works for you on a computer, you have to imagine, because we really built it to be like you're actually in a concert.
Yeah.
And there's many more things to say about that. But if it actually gets through on a computer, then it means it plays. And the reason I know that is that I grew up in a very tiny country town, 5 houses, and I've seen Lawrence of Arabia in black and white on a small television. I've seen it on a scratchy print in our local cinema that we ran. And Steven Spielberg ran his 70mm print that he restored for me while we were eating nachos, giving me a kind of running commentary. Name drop. And it was still a great experience. And I think that is it in the end. It does enhance, it does expand, it does open your synapses, but if it fundamentally works, it works.
The reason that it works so well in any format is the character really comes to life through
Thank
the
you.
performance and through the music. And I found this amazing that you're using archival footage and bringing it back to life, and it feels like you are there watching these performances happen. It feels like you're in the crowd at one of his shows experiencing it. I've never gotten that experience with Elvis before, obviously.
I think that's incredible given you're not watching it in 5:1. But can I say something? Actually, quick potted history. I'm working on Elvis the film. I hear there's some mythical lost, maybe real. I think I might use it in the Vegas showroom. I have the resources to go literally into the salt mines where MGM stores its negatives because it's expensive. They go down there. I'm not there, but I get pictures back where they kick the doors in of the Elvis room. And it's a bit like Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, dust. Dun, 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 ka-ch. And there are not one reel, but 65 boxes. Some marked Elvis 1970, some marked the tour. And then at the same time, Angie Marchese, who's from Graceland, gets hold of this 8mm never before seen. So no sound. Then very quickly, it's transported back to Warner's. It smells of vinegar, which means it's disintegrating. We managed to get it transferred digitally, and then we don't use the reel, finish the movie. What are we going to do with it? We start to find mag tape, which I will always simplify this for people who don't know film, mean we get a lot of the sound off the stage. Great vocals, the band, some orchestration's damaged, sometimes the suite's not as strong, sometimes brilliant. What are we going to do? So then we find this one box, and in it is 30 minutes of Nagra, of Elvis, in the most unguarded way, just talking about himself, his life. And we go, hey, that's it. He should just tell his story. Let's get out of the way. Really, that was the biggest decision John O'Rebin and I made. Then we managed to scrape some money together. It took 2 years to match the pictures. Then I worked with Peter Jackson and a wonderful team in New Zealand. They just do things with love. And we said, if Elvis is here, what would Elvis do? Let's make it like the most immersive, as if he comes to you in a dream, and it's a concert in which he tells and sings his story. So that's what we set out to do.
I've chosen some of my favorite songs from the film that can guide our conversation a little bit.
Beautiful.
And in an order that I've decided sort of on my own. I'll play them for you, and you can tell me about...
I love it. It's
you can
like
tell
a
me
game.
about these songs exactly.
Good first outing. You nailed it. This is the one.
Yeah.
For many reasons.
Yeah. It's playing for you, but it's also playing for everyone watching.
Oh, really?
Back home.
I thought we were having a private listening session.
What did I play? Why and why that song? Why
All right,
why start
why
there?
that is so interesting is that I think in a singular track, it sums up so many things that make Elvis unique. First of all, what you're hearing is Polk Salad Annie.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, working with Jono, my amazing music team, Evan, my mixer, who's been mixing these Elvis tracks on these Neves we've found ever since we started the movie. What you see is Elvis rehearsing, constructing a song at the same time as performing it, and you move between these two states. He doesn't perform like any other performer, and I know this because a very iconic performer friend of mine said, you know, I used to not rehearse, but Elvis just kind of did it. But what you see him doing is orchestrating the whole band and the singers, and they're following him, and he's sort of cooking it up. But his energy in rehearsal is identical to his energy on stage.
Yeah.
Then when he's on stage, and this is the big thing, he starts to sing the song, and the song is a quite little obscure song, really. And it's basically about this girl down in Louisiana where the alligators are so mean. And while it's kind of funny, it's really about grand poverty. I mean, they're so poor, they're basically eating weeds. Yeah. Polk salad. And as he sings it, and the guitar lines in it are awesome, he does this bit in the middle where he's basically doing, he's what we would call scatting, yeah. But and he goes, and he marches a bit. And this is all going to make sense in a minute. He started marching. That's because he went in the army. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Now that middle section just defines what is so unusual about him. In that although they rehearsed the songs and he would orchestrate them, you see it in rehearsal, they never knew what he was going to do. Yeah. They never knew what he was going to do. Ronnie Tutt would say, I just have to watch him, and if his body moved, they never knew when he'd bring in, when he'd bring it out. His body became the conductor. He would possess the music. They didn't know what was going to be the next song, let alone what he was going to do. And they were glued to him and reacting to him. And he had such a good relationship with everybody on stage that they would be all coherent. They didn't know how many rounds of that. When he starts doing the rhythm getting faster and he's physically moving up, da, da, you don't know what's going to happen. Da, 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 and you see him in rehearsals, he goes, oh. Everyone's waiting. I mean, he is the music and he is conducting them. And then the wind up. Now, when he does that, and they do that, then we, the audience, also do it with him. Yeah. And this makes him completely unique. And as he says earlier in the film, he goes, you know, well, I just do what I feel. I always have. It's
primal. That's what it feels like to me. When this song comes on in the film, that's when I start to understand Elvis in a different way.
I'm glad you say that, because in all the films I make, I tend structurally to either challenge the audience a little bit and blah, 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 blah. And then I know for big Elvis fans, there's a bit of a quick lesson of Elvis, and they might go, I've seen this before. But I do that because also there's a lot of people going to see it and not only don't know anything about him, actually don't care for him at all, maybe even do not like him. And you want to just remind everybody how he got there. He's coming out of being the highest paid actor in Hollywood, but self-loathing. So I consider this number to be what I would call the marriage certificate. This is, you either sign on or you don't. And so far, even I'm shocked of how many people sign on. But after this, as you call it, primal moment, that's when you can feel the audience literally change. They forget themselves. They go, because they are now swept up in this church of music in which he's the high priest, serving something greater than all of us.
I love how you talk about how he uses his body and his physicality, how he uses his voice. It's like everything becomes an instrument on the stage in this, and how he's conducting. I just think that song to me it's how it happens in the movie. It's a moment of brilliance that really paints a picture of who this guy is for someone who wasn't there. And this is when I understood it. So I wanted to start with that song.
I got to just shout out to John O'Redman, who's edited with me for many years. He's he also some in partnership with others, but in this, it's his very particular craft. Jamison Shaw, Evan McEwen, you have no idea how much construct to just so subtly get those tempos that are out to just glide like that. That is a editorial tour de force. And Jono actually started as a kid with U2. So he's been in music as much as I have. And when we make movies, before we make the movies, we make kind of these tone poems of the feel of the movie.
The other thing that you mentioned that I want to hit on for 1 second is the match cuts that happen when you're cutting these different, from the rehearsal to the actual stage performance to another stage performance, 100%. And you see like moments like this when it cuts. The editing is beautiful.
There's actually a moment, and this was a particularly, I think, tour de force, where Elvis makes a joke in the rehearsal room and he throws something up, and it immediately cuts to water falling down his backs to us, and the splash brings you back into
on the stage. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is the next one.
Baby,
oh yeah.
Baby, you wearing that love, don't look you.
So I want to know about the song in particular, and Jameson and what his role is, and because is it multiple songs combined?
Okay,
How does that work?
So what happens is, because I had the label with RCA, and unbelievable, shout out to Rob Santos, unbelievable access to masters. I mean, just so many takes of Elvis's voice clean, but he also worked with the greatest musicians in the world. We started to develop this thing we call DNA, which was not to sort of do beats and, program and all that, was to take the instrumentation, but to join it in different ways. So you actually taking 2 or 3 songs. It wasn't so much as a mash-up as creating a new work out of several songs. The way to describe it is, if mashups are kind of sampling 2 songs, but you can recognize them, sewing these together in a manner in which you're not quite sure, you can see the seams,
Especially with the visual component happening at the same time.
Which is what happens is he does a song. I think we didn't have anything on mic that was strong enough. We wanted something that caught this moment where Elvis does spontaneously one night, just throws himself into the audience, and then it becomes a thing where there is this, mass kissing going on. And
describe what's happening.
Yeah, he just goes...
He's just walking around kissing all these women on the lips.
Well, I'm not going to be defending him, but they're kissing him back. You might, the couple of them just leap on the stage and go the tongue. While that is fun, and people might say, well, it was another time, and it's done in a kind of joyous, fun way, and they kiss him, and we call it a beehive. There's literally the people literally swing off chandeliers and all that. It is connected, I think, to something much more profound. And that is going back to Elvis's upbringing, meeting Sam Bell, who was the young kid. Was it just Elvis or a bunch of them?
It was just he and his mother when they moved in.
Right.
Because his father was there too, but he wasn't there that much. They were during the segregated time, so it was like, he lived with 4 houses there. There was white families.
And Sam said to me, my grandparents loved him. We had a nice house. But Elvis, he was from East Tupelo, and they were really poor over there.
Yeah.
And his dad went to a famous jail. So there was always this profound insecurity inside of him. And then he grows up looking like a Greek god and has the voice of Orpheus, right? So there's a kind of, I think within him, this paradoxical quality where he can't not sign someone's autograph, where he cannot leave a fan for a second, where when he gets on stage, he gives himself his all. When he's in rehearsals, he gives himself his all. He disarms by being goofy and funny, which is, I think, one of the big qualities in the film. You know, I got footage of him hanging out just talking to the suites. He wants everyone to ignore the fact that he looks like the statue of David and what he can do and see the man inside and be so polite.
Yeah.
But it's a giving. And so I think he actually physically gives himself to the audience. He part understands it and he part doesn't. I mean, Vernon says, well, when it all started happening in the flash and I was worried for him because there was scratches all over him. I mean, from the moment he was like 19.
Yeah.
People were literally trying to tear him apart and they tore his car apart. And what is that? Is that fandom? I mean, I see it with some of the K-pop kids now. You know, they're starting to get really, really concerned because, like, they're fans now. And, you know, I'm not trying to make any judgment, but I see it's almost like they go beyond just wanting a picture.
Yeah.
They want to eat you.
Yeah. His generosity comes across really well in this film. He hands himself over, not just on stage, but in life to like the world.
Yeah.
And he becomes, you know, bigger
It's
than
not
just...
fake. It's actually something he cannot escape from. And I think it's both his politeness, his kindness, his empathy is both his super strength and ultimately something that probably becomes something that allows him to be caught in that cage in Vegas as well, because he finds it very difficult not to see the good in people and not to rail against things that, you know, ultimately, and we can talk about it later, but he never went on that tour. He's having the world tour now that he dreamed of having, but he says it in the film. He thinks he's going to rehearse once in Vegas, build a big show and go to England and go to Japan, but he never does.
But before we move on to the next song, let's take a step back for a second. This movie marks the beginning of this end period of his life. Can you set the stage for us of like what's happening with Elvis and the whole Las Vegas thing? The movie starts with these scenes of the strip, the lights flashing, putting his sign up.
Yeah, like a couple of snapshots. I mean, just very potted. First of all, you know, there's a kid. He's a rebel. He wears makeup at school. He's the most famous 20-year-old in the world when there were not famous 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as a teenager. Yeah. You know, wow, flash of lightning, world changes. Most parents are terrified. Bang. Bit like BTS, he's in the army. Mum dies. Suddenly. His heart is ripped out. So lonely. The colonel has him come back. Now he's the number one paid actor in Hollywood, making films that increasingly he becomes self-loathing about. And this is this thing of like, well, so good looking, I'm in Hollywood, got everything, $1 million, but then just music, not good.
Yeah.
Reclaims himself through the comeback special.
Please let my dream come true. Right now.
Then decides, I'm going to show him what I can do. I'm going into Vegas, and everyone expects him to do nostalgia, sort of retirement show. And he invents everything. He didn't have a stylist. He worked with Bill Ballou on the jumpsuits. But the look, the movement, the big band mixing the gospel, everything. But thinks he's going to go on tour with it. So when the show's about to open, by then the Beatles have come along, Doors are there. It's a bit like, you know, is Elvis relevant or not? Puts the show on. The show we see is filmed the following year. This is the second version of it. So he's at his absolute prime. Nobody is ready for what they're about to see. I spoke to Clive Davis. You know who Clive Davis is? I'm sure you do. And Clive said, of everything he's ever been at, it's still the greatest opening night he's ever been at, because no one was expecting, him to do everything from reinvent his old rocker songs to giant, like taking a Simon and Garfunkel folk song and turn it into a gospel power ballad. No one expected it. And no one expected the physicality, the kind of power. They'd forgotten that he has this almost mythical power over an audience. So, bah! I mean, Rolling Stone came to sort of fleer and scorn, you know, because like then it would have been 70, Beatles would have broken up, it would have been, you know, prog rock coming, all that. They were just gobsmacked. And you think, where does he go now? He's got to fly around the world. But does a tour around America, does it again. Does it again. Around America, does it. Is a bird hitting a glass wall. Can't quite understand, doesn't really ever get the tour together, and never performs outside America until he dies.
This is like what happens in the...
I think there is a presence.
There's an amazing scene where the lights, what song is it? Where the lights are flashing on him.
Oh, you're talking Tiger Man maybe early on.
Yeah, Tiger Man.
Well, I get up on a mountain and I call my mountain.
By the way, for some reason, I just said this morning, I got these videos of like little 10-year-old kids going to see the movie, and that is the song they all bopping out to. And they shake their heads around. I think it's the drums. And a guy in a brightly colored suit. But it's funny generationally, I'm telling you, we're seeing a phenomena. We're seeing grandparents taking their 50-year-old son, taking their grandchildren that are 10 and rocking out.
This is the next one.
Oh, yeah.
To me, this is where it just like starts going to another stratosphere.
Well, I have a very personal childhood connection to this song because this dropped when I was a ballroom dancer. And I used to go up to the guy playing the record and say, "Hey, mate, can you drop Burning Love?" They won me a few ribbons. And I got Gran to make me like a Elvis jumpsuit. It played.
Tell me about your relationship with Elvis, like from childhood, going back.
So we grew up in Sydney and then grew up in a very small isolated town, like 7 houses, middle of nowhere. We have a gas station, farm, and little restaurant and a supermarket. And we're but we're on the highway. And my parents took it over. Dad was very transformative about it. But he was very aware that we shouldn't be isolated. So painters used to live with us and artists. And he met my mum through photography. So we were ballroom dancing, commando training, breeding horses. We had our own shops. I was doing theater shows, making it was just relentless. I didn't think so. We were just little kids.
Just what it was, yeah.
Yeah, but ballroom dancing was a big part of it. And Dad would like drive us hours in the weeknight to do lessons. And then you'd go on competitions. Oh, but at some point, I forgot to mention, we were running the local cinema because Dad was from the Vietnam War. He knew how to run a 16mm projector. And every Sunday there'd be an Elvis matinee. So I would see the matinee and go, who is this cool guy? Now, I was probably watching something like Easy Come, Easy Go.
Easy come, easy go. Here, there, everywhere. Crazy love is in the air delightful.
And then I was 70. He actually dropped that song around that time. And I thought that was cool. But then, I had a very vast musical heart and education. I went on to opera, Bowie, the Michaels and the Eltons and that pop vernacular. And Elvis was there, but like a lot of people, he sort of faded. I never turned against him. I always recognized him. But I loved Amadeus when I got into storytelling. And there's always talk about doing music biopics, a lot of folk. And I thought the thing about Amadeus is you learn a lot about Mozart, but really it's about jealousy. It has a universal point to it. And so I thought if you want to do a musical story, I mean, the absolute best to explore America in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s is not only Elvis, but the relationship between this carnival huckster who only knows how to sell, like could sell or hustle you or snow job you, as he used to call it. Snowing you is pulling the wool over your eyes. And he loved it. President of the Snowman's Club. So that's Colonel Tom Parker, and Elvis is Orpheus. What he thought was a carnival act turns out to be this incredibly sensitive, unique being who could channel music so that the very rocks and stones would get up and follow him. And he's this kid who grows up in one of the few white houses in the black community. So he's down in Beale Street absorbing black music, but also country music, but also he's into opera, Mario Lanza, you know?
So it becomes a perfect storm.
He's this absolutely unusual creature. And then you've got the greatest, I mean, Parker was a selling genius. You know, there are these characters who are so good at selling you anything, pulling the wool over your eyes and saying, roll up, roll up. And even though you know you're being worked over, you kind of love it. You love being sold a bill of goods, you know, that may be not real. In Elvis's case, he was more than real. So there's a tension of that is that they rise so high they get close to the sun. And then it's a bit like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a marriage that they can't let go of it, but it also destroys each of them.
This is America, is these two together. And this
well, I think both sides of it, is it not? I mean,
100%.
I mean, I'm probably wrong. I used to be a bit guarded about speaking so openly, but it was part of the motivation. There is this one side of it, which I don't judge, which is the big sell. And the other side is the big soul, is the creative, the pure creative, the mix. I mean, Elvis says in this, I like all kinds of music. I like the Spanish flavor, the Mexican flavor. I like, you know, Mario Lanza. I love opera, you know. I love R&B. I love, you know, he just loves music. He mixes it all up. This is what, to me, is one of the great things that America brings to the 20th century, and that is it can take 4 or 5 different things and make a new amalgam.
This is a special version of this song. All the songs
let
are
me
special, but this
here.
one is, there's an orchestra.
Yeah, okay, let me explain what happens. Finding the sound takes 2 years. We get the tapes. Some's good, some's not. We get Burning Love. There's already a London Symphony Orchestra version that had been done. So we think, well, we want this to be kind of both score and the rock and roll, and also to sort of serve, there's a few dream sequences in it where what you might call montage. And so we think, well, let's kind of do that, but also do our own thing. So we're mixing between the true gruntiness of the stage, and Elvis is singing it for the first time, and he doesn't particularly like the song. He's not so sure about it. So he's holding a piece of paper, reading the lyrics, and everyone on stage will be like, we're going to get through this. And at the same time, we're bringing in the London Symphony while he's going like 15 cities in 15 days. So I think it oscillates between this kind of like, my God, you know, do or die, are we going to be able to rock through this? And then there's this huge kind of operatic orchestral version of it. And you see there's a moment when we stop and we just do the band on the stage. And then in the middle of it, Elvis goes, he's so elated, he goes, and then we did it, you know, and I did it. And he goes, and he's telling the guys about, you know, the cues and everything. And I guess for him, he says it in the film. He doesn't want the band to get comfortable. He's never comfortable. He wants a bit of fear because it's like the first time with the audience. And I always think with Elvis, everything's a bit like for the first time, you know? He keeps it alive.
He's not like running through a set list in these shows. He's changing.
I'm glad you bring that up. I have worked with so many great artists of every conception, from opera to rock to the new pop, you know, and brilliant. Generally speaking, you craft the show, you have a set list, you rehearse it, you know what you're doing, you respond to the audience every night. It's spontaneous, but you really work the show. Yeah. Elvis just worked the material. No one had any idea. When he goes, bridge, everyone goes like, oh my God, it's bridge, you know? And that means, boy, do they have to be on their toes.
And that is where the magic comes from of you never know what's going to happen. And his ability to feel the crowd.
1,000%.
That comes across. He's reacting. Oh, we need to bring it up. We need to bring it down.
Yeah. You know what? There's that nice little quote. We don't have anyone else speaking in the doco, but occasionally a journalist says something, and a journalist says something like, Rolling Stone says Elvis Presley, except maybe Mick Jagger, is the only artist who can play the audience like an instrument. And there is absolute truth in that.
There's a song where I feel like that happens. Another like call and response kind of song. And this was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Well, I've never been to England.
Just raw.
But I kind of like the Beatles.
So this is like a song by Three Dog Night that he's doing a cover of. I want to go into a little section of like some of the covers. He's bringing in, you talked about this before, but he's bringing in contemporary music. He's bringing in rock and roll as he's reinventing himself, but he makes it his own.
The thing is, he never does not make it his own.
It's an Elvis song.
It's like Shakespeare is universal because it can endlessly be interpreted. And Elvis is an interpreter. He makes it his own, but he also makes it speak his truth and to the audience in that moment at the time. Think of this. He says in this show, well, I'm going to do this show and I'm going to go to England and I'm going to go to Japan.
Yeah.
And then this song is him saying, I've never been there. I've made it to Oklahoma. And how prophetic is the song. I kind of like the Beatles. And then later on we see him rehearsing Beatles songs. Or did I do a spoiler alert?
Little sister,
Yeah.
don't you do what your big sister does. Hey, get back. Hey, get back.
This is another moment where you get to see him. You're starting to understand him as a performer. And then he does this combination where he
We
brings
call it a
in,
mashup now, but he just slides into Get Back.
and he just starts riffing on it.
Yeah, and what he's really doing there, and we'll get to how Elvis communicates, because I love to talk about the bit where, they say, what do you think about the Vietnam War? He says, I'm just an entertainer, right?
Yeah.
But then in the next breath, which they often don't play, they say, well, what about other artists? Should they express themselves? No, he goes, no, absolutely. Yeah. He covers a Bob Dylan song. There's a song he does, we have him doing pretty quickly after, which begins with these lyrics. And I think they're worth thinking about. And I'll probably get them wrong, but he says, there are people on reservation and in the ghetto, but for the grace of God go you and I. So before you criticize, judge, or abuse, walk a mile in my shoes, which is in their shoes. So if you really want to know, I think, the man's heart, you have to listen to what are the words of the songs and how he interprets them. But in that song, Little Sister Sliding to Get Back, what he's really saying is, and he says it, we haven't got it in the film, the rock and roll is essentially these 4 chords, and it's what you do with them, but they're universal. Yeah.
All of these bands, he inspired them. There would be probably no Beatles if it wasn't for Elvis in the first place.
I mean, can I tell you, I have this big string of quotes that I had in my post-production space. The quotes will surprise you. I mean, Bob Dylan saying, the greatest moment of my life is when Elvis covered a song of mine.
Yeah.
I mean, David Bowie says, well, I had this kind of unfortunate thing of being born in the same day as Elvis, But I've seen Bowie, who I admired incredibly, I worked with, and then became very good friends. Around the 80s, it might have been. I've seen stuff that was outtakes of him just doing a photo shoot. And he's sitting there and I'm looking like, he's like, they got the Bowie, it's a 90s thing. Would have been after day in, day out. And he's kind of rehearsing it. And he's got the guitar and you know what he's doing? He's actually playing, we're going up, we're going down. We're going up. And that is the song that Elvis and the band used to just do to warm up. He's doing an Elvis thing, It's very hard to find any musician who doesn't have some, I haven't found one, who doesn't have some actual, I mean, you know what's amazing? The Clash, their first album cover, is a copy of Elvis's album cover from the 50s, just all sort of smashing the guitar. I mean, I could go on. And then the Beatles is really interesting because
at this time, the Beatles are towards the end of their run, but they're the biggest band in the world still and have been the biggest band in the world.
Yeah, no question. And I mean, it's up to, Paul and Ringo to speak more directly, but I can say this because I probably don't know if I should have said it, but Austin spent a day traveling on a train with Paul. And he talked about meeting Elvis, and they were kids and all stumbling out of the car. And then there was Elvis. But he talks about actually doing a song with Elvis.
Yeah.
And, you know, you see it in Peter Jackson, who was so magical in bringing this footage you're seeing of Elvis back to life. Him and his team, they're amazing. They do it with love. But their film on the Beatles, to me, if you want to learn about collective creativity, how to get together as a group, this is the highest watermark. You see that it just doesn't come out perfect. You know, someone writes, no, 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 scramble eggs, you know, the sharing. But you see them during that documentary talking about Elvis. Oh, it's Elvis's birthday today, you know? So the thing is, when John Lennon said before Elvis there was nothing, he didn't mean that there wasn't like all these black musicians. What he was saying was, for them, as white kids in England where music was so horrible, and they were in bombed out England, they're saying for them, I mean, they had no exposure to black music. For them, seeing this other kid in America doing this crazy stuff, you know, Bruce Springsteen has it in his stage show. And he doesn't mention the word Elvis. He says, and there I am, a kid, and I'm looking at the television. And then a flash of lightning on the television, and my life changes. And he was obviously watching the Ed Sullivan Show.
As a great philosopher once said, you ain't nothing but...
He opens everything up for rock and rollers. I want to pause the conversation with Baz for a second to dive a little bit deeper into just how revered Elvis was by the generation of artists that followed. Let's go to the studio for a short essay. By the time Elvis Presley returned to the stage in 1968, a new generation of artists had already begun reshaping rock and roll. The Beatles had transformed pop music. Bob Dylan had turned rock into a songwriter's medium. David Bowie was beginning to redefine the idea of a rock star. And Bruce Springsteen was still a young musician watching it all from New Jersey. And each of those artists would later say the same thing about where it all started for them: hearing Elvis for the first time. Take the Beatles. John Lennon grew up idolizing American rock and roll. In our Chess Records episode, we talked about how his early heroes included Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley. Berry showed Lennon how rock songs could be written. Elvis showed him something else. Lennon later said it wasn't until Heartbreak Hotel that he really got into rock and roll. From that moment on, Lennon saw music differently. He even started trying to grow sideburns and dress like Elvis. But Lennon didn't just want to look like Elvis, he wanted to sound like him. Heartbreak Hotel had a dark, echo-drenched sound, a slow blues groove, and a vocal delivery that felt raw and emotional. That intensity would later show up in Lennon's own singing, especially in the early Beatles records. Nearly a decade later, the Beatles finally met their hero. In August 1965, the band spent an evening at Elvis's Bel Air home in California. According to accounts of the meeting, the group initially sat there, almost silently, awestruck. Elvis eventually broke the tension by asking, "If you guys are going to sit here and stare at me all night, I'm going to go to bed." According to the other band members, John eventually ended up jamming with Elvis in another room. Imagine being a fly on that wall. What's striking about that meeting is how small the age gap actually was. Elvis was only about 5 years older than Lennon, but culturally, the distance felt enormous. Elvis had already changed the world once. The Beatles were in the middle of changing it again. Elvis didn't just influence rock bands. He also left a mark on another great songwriter of the 1960s, Bob Dylan. Dylan once said, "When I first heard Elvis Presley's voice, I just knew that I wasn't going to work for anybody and nobody was going to be my boss." He is the deity supreme of rock and roll religion as it exists in today's form. Hearing him for the first time was like busting out of jail. Years later, the connection between the two artists came full circle when Elvis recorded Dylan's song, "Tomorrow is a Long Time." Dylan later reflected, "That's the one recording I treasure the most." Despite that admiration, the two musicians never actually met. Dylan later explained why. I never met Elvis, Dylan says. I never met Elvis because I didn't want to meet Elvis. Elvis was in his 60s movie period, and he was just cranking them out and knocking them off one after another. And Elvis had kind of fallen out of favor in the 60s. He didn't really come back until whatever it was, 68? David Bowie was born on January 8th, the exact same day as Elvis Presley. Bowie later recalled how fascinated he was by that coincidence. I was absolutely mesmerized, Bowie said. I couldn't believe it. He was a major hero of mine, and I was probably stupid enough to believe that having the same birthday as him actually meant something. Bowie once described Elvis in those early years as an indomitable spirit of music, adding, it was really quite a rebellion that he cast on America and all of Western society, really. The white West, anyway. For Bowie, Elvis was a model for what a rock star could look like. The confidence, the clothing, the theatrical presence on stage, all of it would echo later in Bowie's own performances, from the lightning bolt imagery to the extravagant costumes of the Ziggy Stardust era. In 1972, during the height of the Ziggy Stardust era, Bowie attended one of Elvis's Madison Square Garden concerts, still dressed in his Ziggy persona. He realized he was drawing attention to himself in the crowd and felt embarrassed. Their careers nearly intersected more directly as well. Bowie wrote the song Golden Years with Elvis in mind, hoping Presley might record it. Elvis ultimately turned the song down, and it became one of Bowie's own classics. But Bowie claims Elvis eventually asked him to produce a later album for him. This, of course, never happened, but imagine what that might have sounded like. Another artist who felt Elvis's impact early was Bruce Springsteen. Springsteen grew up in New Jersey, and like millions of kids in the 1950s, he heard Elvis's 1956 recording of Hound Dog as a child. The song, he later said, hit him like a thunderbolt. Springsteen saw Elvis perform on television. In his memoir, Born to Run, Springsteen describes the moment vividly. 70 million Americans that night were exposed to this hip-shaking human earthquake, Bruce wrote. A fearful nation was protected from itself by the CBS cameramen who were told to shoot the kid only from the waist up. No money shots, no shifting, grinding, joyfully thrusting crotch shots. It didn't matter. It was all there in his eyes, his face, the face of a Saturday night jukebox Dionysus, shimmying eyebrows and rocking band. A riot ensued, Springsteen continued. When it was over that night, those few minutes when the man with the guitar vanished into a shroud of screams, I sat there transfixed in front of the television set, my mind on fire. I had the same 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. I looked hideous, but I figured that part out. So what was missing? The guitar. Moments like that created a whole generation of musicians who grew up in Elvis's shadow. And Elvis's influence didn't stop with classic rock. By the late 1970s, punk bands were trying to tear down the rock establishment, but even then, Elvis's shadow was still there. The Clash's London Calling album cover deliberately echoed the famous design from Elvis's first record. Even punk, which claimed to reject rock's past, couldn't quite escape him. Elvis had written himself into the DNA of rock and roll itself. I want to shift, we've talked about this a little bit, but into the spiritual side and how important that is. The gospel music, the very overtly religious ideas in these songs.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting contrast to have this raw sexual rock and roll music and this Christian spiritual gospel hymnal stuff, but they're also connected.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of context for this. Like, Ray Charles, one of his early big hits, is in fact a gospel song, just converted.
Oh, yeah, she give me money when I'm in need. My mother's
A lot of religious singers from the black church took a lot of their music and just it grew into, and they ended up being a bit divided from the church over that. Now, what you got to remember with Elvis was he was obsessed with being in a white gospel group and was rejected. And then he used to sneak into East Street Church and watch Mahalia Jackson and big black gospels But gospel is his safe place. Can you imagine? He says it in this. He does the show you saw. He leaves the stage, goes upstairs in the penthouse, and gets with the guys and sings gospel until the sun comes up in the morning. What is that? That is him filling himself spiritually. That is his absolute safe place. And that's, I think, the nature of the person, is that gospel is the only time he probably feels truly at peace. And you're right. For him doing a rock show and stop and say, now I'm just going to sing a piece of absolute pure gospel.
Oh, God, by the way, how great that was.
How great they are, by the way. That's it. I think I'm right. I think that 16 mil, that's absolutely never been seen. And it's certainly never been seen in that condition before. There might be bootlegs. There's a lot of bootleg and pirated stuff out there. But
can you talk about the material and like the trade? This underground drug trade of
baby,
Elvis.
I can get you the good shit. First of all, we got the primary tapes, and that was a lot of stuff coming off stage. Sometimes, like in the Ghetto, it just wasn't strong enough, so we decided to do that modern interpretation. But then, look, there are these very private collectors, and I all respect to them, because what's beautiful about them is that they aren't collecting it to make $1 out of it. It's a bit like collecting art. They just want to know it's on their wall. They've got it. They're very private. And there was one particular one who came forward when we were in need and really helped us with something we really needed. On the other hand, there's a big black market for buying stuff, and I've been told to tone it down a bit because I might get into trouble. I don't know, in a dark alley. But there was a bit of going to a random car park and, here's a bag of money and please thank you for that very much. That particular vocal or that particular missing piece, bit of that.
It's money well spent.
I think so. We did this for a low budget, actually.
What was the budget? All in.
I can't say the number, but can I tell you? No, I can't, but can I tell you? It wasn't like everyone went like, oh, yeah, do whatever you want. In fact, shout out to Sony Vision. That is not Sony Pictures.
Yeah.
That is not Sony, the big record company. The head of Sony, the big record company, at the Vision have Tom, who's the head of Sony Vision, has his vision himself, which is to make only music-driven films. And we got to thank him for that, because he was the one that stepped up to the plate and said, look, I can get you a few $million, but not a lot. And it was a labor of love, and everybody who worked on it did it really driven by love.
It's great that the technology has improved such too that you're able to take this old footage and really bring it to life. I mean, you talked about Peter Jackson a bunch,
but
that
one thing I want to say is, but there's no AI in this.
Yeah.
What it is Peter and his team. I mean, look what he did with that First World War footage.
Yeah.
Look what he did with the Beatles. What he's doing is, so he'll be going through the neg, printing it, taking out aberrations, and also probably, and what he's doing is sort of rebuilding grain sometimes. It's not like you're scraping from the internet and randomly making something that's very convincing that, oh, doesn't it look like? You're actually rebuilding the neg and then the printing, and then we colored it in our realm, and then the music build. I mean, I had to re-sweeten orchestration. We did some score.
It's like when a museum will take an old Renaissance painting and restore it. It's like piece by piece, like little.
Yeah, and you got to be.
And that's happening with the film.
Yeah, and there's a philosophy there though, because like when they restored Wizard of Oz, I know the guy that was doing that. You could suddenly, it was so sharp you could see the wires on the monkeys. Question: do you leave the wires in or do you remove them? So that's why I said a construct when we found this tape, of saying this is not a documentary, or maybe, as they like to say, Neon like to say, it's more than a documentary. And I say it's not a concept film, it's more than a concept film, because to me it's sort of a dreamscape, so that we have the license to go, look, we had this little bit of him singing. He sings a piece of gospel, which is Oh Happy Day. The Sweets recording wasn't really strong enough to put in 5-1. Now, what do we do? Because I can't waste this gold. So we think Shannon Saunders, who is in the Elvis movie, who actually has one of the great gospel choirs in Nashville, what if we gave Elvis his dream of singing with like the choir that sang with Mahalia? So he records in Nashville, and what you're hearing is Elvis singing with that choir in a sort of fantasy sequence.
It's that creative license that makes it something entirely new and special, but still is very authentic and real to who he is.
Thank you.
On a cold and gray Chicago morning, a poor little baby child is born in the...
Tell me about the music here. This is the way that you reworked this.
Jam construction of it. We have the vocal. The actual signal coming off the stage is not strong enough, and there's only this one bit. He only does Ghetto once in this very unusual suit, and it wasn't great. And you wanted it to be great because it's such an important song. You know, when he does In the Ghetto, everyone around him, his dearest, closest friends, said, don't do it, Elvis.
Yeah.
This is not you. This is too political. And he does it, and of course it's a huge hit. And I think Rolling Stone writes Elvis's first message song. But, I mean, the words of that song, you know, just the perpetuation of this cycle. And so we thought, let's do it in a way, let's not try and do a sound align. Let's sort of look at if it was happening now, what might that be like? And that's how I go at what it might be like if it was happening in a contemporary ear now.
So well done. And just
Thank
different
you.
and fresh, but almost like pure or something like that.
I
It
think
really
we
comes
try
across.
to be true to the storytelling in the song and the emotion in the song. And props, by the way, to my music team. I mean, producing is one of my great joys. I learned it with Anton Monstead years ago when we did this little album called Something for Everybody. I've worked with the greats. I mean, Jay and I doing Gatsby was one of the great joys of my life. But, you know, Jamison is now started as a music editor, I think, with us, and is now a producer in his own right. Nothing makes me happier than people who started my team and they flourish and they become their own entities. It's like I started working with Nelly Hooper, and he had a music arranger called Craig Armstrong and a programmer called Marius de Vries. They're both highly acclaimed, incredible standalone composers in their own right.
Of all the songs that make it into the film, how many of them were, oh, we have this footage, this is perfect, we got to use this, versus you said even before, this song has to be in?
It was so difficult because there are, and look, I just want to say this really directly, both to the EP core, that's our shorthand for Elvis Presley core fans, EPHC, which is EP hardcore, and people who don't even care about Elvis. We're opening on, we've done amazing last weekend. It was kind of amazing. Bit of a star turn, but we're exclusively IMAX. This weekend, we're on 1,900 screens. That's pretty unheard of for something of this nature. But if we get a strong enough result, it shows the validity of being able to do Blu-ray extensions, maybe another version, because we had to be very strong.
Yeah.
We had to say, no, we're driven by the story that Elvis tells us. And so choices were those choices. There was whole songs we had to drop, things like that. But Jono and I developed pods because his life was like, okay, early days 50s. All right, the movies. All right, now, like Ghetto and Walk a Mile in My Shoes, is Elvis speaking his heart about the world around him. You know, for someone who had been taught by the Colonel not to get involved in the political conversation, those songs speak his heart. So he talks about that. That's why we put that interview in there where he's being challenged and let him answer with his song.
It's an amazing moment in the movie, and it's really emotionally powerful and resonant. I want to do one more, but also I just want to play this for a second because you did touch on this earlier, Bridge Over Troubled Water, and how he puts his special spin on it. It's an interesting song choice, but it fits perfectly. It like makes sense completely.
Yeah, like when you think of the Simon and Garfunkel, it's so folk and beautiful and perfect in its own right. But I think that's Elvis turning it really into a religious, I mean, when I say religious, a spiritual.
Yeah.
He makes it a spiritual. So, as with any great work, Shakespeare, a great song, there's an old adage, which is something is truly true, it can be interpreted many different ways in many different times. And my shorthand for that is that it can move through time and geography, meaning it can move through time, but it can also touch people no matter who you are, where you're from. It unites.
That song transcended Paul Simon and Simon and Garfunkel, transcended Elvis, and it's like when he's doing the hymn. It's just like it's like a hymn.
Yeah, and what's great about it, I swear, I don't know about you, but I heard it as a kid. This woman, she was kind of cool, and I had to go and stay with her for a weekend, and she was so lovely, and she asked me to help with the milking, the cows. She's young, and she had the Simon and Garfunkel record, she put it on. And I just assumed that song had already existed before. I didn't really. And a lot of the Beatles are like that too. You go, come on, Blackbird, surely that's a folk song from... They're so pure that you think they've somehow... You've heard them somewhere else in time. But that's what great songs do. They somehow connect the dots from the past to the future and into infinity.
Last one.
Okay. Hear me.
Elvis, white trash. Elvis, the Memphis Flash. Elvis under the hood. Elvis with Cadillac blood. Elvis.
Who's speaking?
Bono.
Interesting.
Okay, this is what happens. So I know Bono ever since Moulin Rouge. In fact, he was one of the artists I rang when I had a problem with publishing on Moulin Rouge. Started with Elton. And I rang and said, yeah, I'll do a song for you and I'll help you with the publishing. Very good friends, great respect. I'm in the south of France, hanging out in Cap having a little cafe. And I go, I'm sure Bono's got doesn't he and Edge live over there? I'm actually staying in this wonderful, beautiful, crumbling mansion into the ocean. But my life generally is tough. I want you to know that, Jack. I don't live like you, like a king. So I text Bono, don't come back. I'm about to leave. Last day he goes, yes, wrong number. It's my old number. So I go over and I'm telling him what I'm doing. And he goes, you know, I wrote a poem about Elvis. So he goes and gets it and he does the poem. We think, wow, that's amazing. So I go back. Now, John O'Redman, who's my absolute creative partner in this, is Irish. And when he was a kid, he started out by cutting for U2, a little known band called U2. So we're trying to see how to finish this because do we go to the way we finished Elvis? Do we go to the tragedy? And it just didn't seem right because a lot of greats, like someone was saying to me the other day, I thought it was a good comparison, Marilyn Monroe. You lean into the tragic part a little much. We've sort of forgotten to celebrate the gift. And so one day, we've got a version of it, and Johnny just stuck it in, and I come in, and I go, yeah. But I think it's just Bono, like, what about everyone else? And then I think, hang on. Like, isn't that a universal statement? It's just one of the many, many artists who have so much to say about Elvis. And also, the film's a bit like a poem. And so to end it with an open poem by another great who's been so influenced by Elvis. I mean, in the Vegas show, you two have all that Elvis imagery. We just couldn't take it out. There just was no other better way. And so I rang Bono. I said, hey, the poem? Look, because he'd written it for some earlier, it might be complicated, everything with publishing complicated. Bono just texted back and said, are you kidding? I'll be honored. Absolutely. And so that's how it's there.
It's a nice ending moment that reminds you of just how important he is and how respected and revered he is as a musician, first and foremost, and then also as a cultural figure.
I think, Jack, it's an ending moment that isn't an ending. Yeah. And that's the nature of this film. We didn't want to go boom, boom, third act closure because there is no first, second, and third act, somewhat. Yes, we tell the story a little linear. He says this line in the show. He says, well, there's the image and then there's the man. It's very hard to live up to an image. And we really wanted to let the audience in to know the man. And that's kind of as if you're sitting at a dinner table and he's just telling you his life.
Well, I think it's well executed. Go watch it in IMAX.
You probably missed out. I'll have to wait till it comes back, unless you want to go to another country. Looking at this amazing office, I'm sure Jack's got airline tickets ready for you to fly to the next exotic location in which it will be opening on IMAX. If not, though, I got to tell you.
Take a train.
Can I tell you something? The mix on a big screen, like we see this 5.1. So you get 7. So the mix will be really interesting. Like on a big screen, it'll kick.
Yeah.
It'll kick. I mean, you saw it on a a computer.
I knew even when I
believe
said it that I shouldn't have even said it. I should have just lied to you.
Yeah. I was about to storm off the show, but you know what? I just thought, no. And then you really made me. Actually, jokes aside, I told you at the beginning, if it works, it can work on a phone. You know? We don't like to admit that we sometimes have a look at something on a phone, but in the end, if it works, it works. Because, yeah, the size and everything, it's added experience, but in the end, it's the storytelling.
Yeah. Well, it's brilliant. Congratulations on an incredible achievement.
Well,
really good.
That is a beautiful thing to say, and this is one hell of a cool show.
The Trackstar Podcast is a presentation of public opinion created by me, Jack Coyne, Kieran Coyne, and Henry Cornaros. Produced by Noah John and Haley Sobel. Edited by Ryan Durgans. Theme and original composition by Kieran Coyne. Mixing by Devin Klein. Our agent is Joanna Orland at UTA. Thanks for listening. See you next Wednesday.